I wanted to ask you about Brian Stevenson's work, which I'm sure you're well familiar with at Equal Justice Initiative, around truth and reconciliation. He's been, I
Mhm.
know, long championing, I mean, for a lifetime, as documented in the film Just Mercy, doing work around, essentially righting wrongs in the criminal justice system for particularly Black men who are wrongfully charged with crimes and often sentenced to death for those crimes. One of the things he
Mhm.
points out is that we can't have reconciliation without truth. We need to have some truth telling about the history of systemic racism in the country and what's happening still today to get to the
Mhm.
reconciliation part. I was wondering just what your take is on that, having done this particular project and talked to so many, particularly Black men and others about the pain that they are living through.
So I think when it comes to reconciliation, it's really about, I agree that it comes down to truth, but the reality is, I don't think America is in a state of really owning its truth,
Mm-hmm.
owning, the things that have been done to Black people for hundreds of years. If you think back to it, like I recently was on a panel and the ADOS was talking about organization, the African slave descendants of African slaves, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. They were saying how, slave owners, they were actually paid for the slaves that they had to let go,
Okay.
right?
Right.
And so that is not like mainstream knowledge, but yet you allowed people to work, for hundreds of years and never be paid, right?
Right.
And then you move through to where, we have the whole civil rights movement, and it was still like, we don't want to be separate and equal. We want to keep you in this box where you're different and you're looked at different and you're looked at as less than. But then if you move to current day, there's still so much of that.
Right.
There isn't that much that has really changed because of the social economic barriers that are often in place because of the mentality that has been ingrained in Black people, which is why the mental health aspect is so important. So it's literally like this full-fledged circle of, well, what do we do? How do we get out of this? Yeah, truth is one part of it and owning it, but what are you going to do to help people change their mentality, to change the way that they view themselves, that will ultimately change how others view them?
Right. How are we going to take our own responsibility for that work in
Exactly.
day-to-day lives? And how are we going to be held, I imagine, accountable as part of that as well, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm curious too to get your take on the amazing, I thought, incredible book Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. I don't know if you've had a chance to read the book, but Ms. Wilkerson points out in her book that some of the historical issues that you raise, essentially that we have a caste structure in the United States, and we'll have long had a caste structure in the United States, which has been in many ways a source of really inspiration for other repressive regimes around the world,
Right.
Nazi Germany, like India, and other countries. So I'm just curious how that sits with you. I don't know if that term has come across your desk in the interviews you were doing, but just that notion of an inculcated kind of strict structure that we are all living amongst and within, and have been born into, as Isabel Wilkerson calls it, kind of the house that we were born into, the old house we were born into that has a leaky roof, or water in the basement that we maybe didn't create, but that we own, we live in.
Right. So I think it just goes around, and you said her book is called Cash, right?
Yeah,
CASH.
CASTE. Yeah, and it's
Cash.
like caste system. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I think that it goes back to what I was saying earlier around like my friends who saw the film and they were just like, oh my gosh, like I fit into this category. Like there are times where a Black guy gets on the elevator, I clench my purse. Like there's certain things that because you've grown up in this society where If your family thinks it, if your family is saying it, then
Mm-hmm.
you believe it, right? And it really takes a strong individual to kind of break those ties and to say, you know what, this is not right, and this is not how I'm going to live my life, and this generational curse is going to stop here.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think it's just, that is definitely on the individual, but they have to be willing to want to change. They have to be willing to open their eyes to like the flaws and the things that aren't right that they've grown up with.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to see it, you're definitely not going to be able to change it.
Right. And if you can't acknowledge it, see it, call it out. And that just speaks to the patterns that you were raising, that we saw in the film, right? Just these recurring stories independently that particularly
Right.
folks have. Yeah.
And that was the great part of doing the film, like, you know, hearing how so much of what one said was almost redundant, even though it was a totally different situation. But it's sad because these people are all over the country,
Mm-hmm.
and yet your stories are so similar.
Right. And I think on the inverse, you know, you have folks, white folks who would have probably, you know, a lot of the opposite stories, right? You know, and I think a lot.
That good old privilege.
That good old privilege of, you know, the officers who, you know, how you doing today, right? Like, how can I help? You know, I mean, I've had many an encounter where, you know, it's like it could have gone 180 degrees the other way if I was not a white man, right? You know, slow down next time, or you know.
But at least you can recognize it, and you can say like, okay, yeah, I see this.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But
there's a lot of people who are completely oblivious to it, and they're just like, well, isn't this what it's like for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the film shares and showcases, no, it's not. That's not the reality for everyone.
Right.
You know, like there was one story that was not in here, but a person got pulled over on their way to work. Their car got ransacked, like whatever, but they still had to show up to work. They still needed to be their best self at work because they can't afford the possibility of losing their job. Mm-hmm. So you don't know what this person is walking into. Sorry, my kids are calling.
No.
You don't know what this person is walking into when they enter your job, because they may have just gone through a life-altering encounter with the police. You just never know. And it's just like, people also don't care.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you can just go to your supervisor and be like, hey, this just happened. And your supervisor is going to be like, well, what did you do? Mm-hmm. You know, if you're of the wrong hue. So.
Right. You can't, it's true. You can't, you know, it's not easy for someone to go, you know, a black woman or black man or someone of color to go to their supervisor and say, you know, systemic racism, you know, happened to me today, and I'm carrying it every single day. You know, it's not
exactly. Like, can you understand this? Can you relate to this? Like, can you understand my issues? So yeah.
I wanted to ask you just a couple more questions. One was about mental health, and which we've touched on a little bit, but I was curious sort of what your takeaway was in terms of how, you know, systemic racism, oppression in our society has impacted the mental health of Black folks, and maybe the inverse, like how has racism in this caste system, so to speak, that we're in, how has that impacted folks who are not Black? So I was wondering if you could take or tackle that question.
So I feel like the systematic racism that Blacks experience, or people of color experience, it messes with their mental health from the standpoint of depending on how strong you are. Because I feel like this question is very different depending on who it's impacting, right? If you are not the individual who has had somebody pouring positivity into you and letting you know you are better than what somebody might tell you are, or whatever, and just having that positive reinforcement, those words of affirmation sprinkled over you daily, then you can easily fall victim to, well, if this is what y'all think of me, why am I even trying to be more, right? Because when you are on the path of doing more, being victorious, leading a people, you're going to be told no, you're going to be rejected, you're going to be denied, you're going to be called all types of things, but you have to have that willpower, that support system that pushes you and lets you know, like, yo, you got this, right? Because of systematic racism, I truly believe that, and this even goes into like entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. Like if you don't have those nuggets and that village to help you, you're stuck.
Right.
You get stuck. And that's how the cycle continues of welfare. That's how the cycle continues of having children early. That's how the cycle continues of, having kids out of wedlock. All of these different things are systematic. Mm-hmm. And so when you I think the other part of the question was, like, if you're not a part of that, like right. you see life very differently, you have no sympathy for those who are in this system. Mm-hmm. You are privileged. So you think, oh, well, you're like this because you didn't work hard. Or you think, oh, this is, just the way that you are because you did not, you decided not to go to college. You made these choices in your life. And because of that, it creates this split where the people over here, they have no idea how to relate to the people over here. And the people on this side, they think that you're lazy, broke down, and no good. Mm-hmm. And so it does a disservice when nobody is willing to cross over into the other side and be like, well, this is really what they go through. This is really what their problems are. Because nobody has it completely easy. Even white privilege is not completely easy. Mm-hmm. There are some things and challenges that they endure as well. But because we don't talk about those things, mm-hmm. and because it's very rare that there's a cross-pollination of understanding, there's two different worlds that we're living in.
Yeah, and it seems like it's even accentuated even more now, right? With the notion of, fake news and I mean, just the idea that we don't even have the same set of facts anymore that we live in. Letitia made a great comment. She said that's such an important point. I'm going to pour some affirmation over my kids as soon as we're done. That is great.
Hey everybody, I'm Jared Milrad, the founder of Movie Karma. Thanks so much for stopping by our page. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this channel with your friends and family so we can continue to transform entertainment into action.